Well, folks, we're going to be talking about this interesting story involving PlayStation and Sony. More like Sony as a company, but it deals with PlayStation, I guess, versus Nintendo. I want to be very clear here. I don't give a crap about console wars. As long as you are playing and having fun. I'm going to be honest. I don't really care what you do. Say you're someone who pirates video games and emulates stuff. Honestly, you're not affecting me. So I really don't care. But what I will say is one thing that is nice is when there's healthy competition in the marketplace. And that competition often pushes companies to do bigger, better things, not just for themselves, but for the consumers as well. Like, some of these practices people don't like with Nintendo is kind of because there's not a lot of competition for what Nintendo's doing. Same has been kind of true for PlayStation, especially with Xbox sort of falling to the wayside. It's kind of led to the fact that there's two titans in this industry right now when it comes to consoles, and that is PlayStation and Nintendo. And I actually happen to enjoy both platforms, the PlayStation 5, the Nintendo Switch 2 right now, even the Xbox Series X that I have in the other room at the moment. I actually like to play on everything. I'm really big into PC gaming. I've been a big PC gamer since the 90s. So to me, I like to see healthy competition. I also like to see the companies show some respect towards each other for that competition and maybe not make assumptions about consumer bases and different reasons that certain things appeal. And while Nintendo has been asked about Sony in the past, they've often just sort of either deflected the question or simply said, hey, we're not going to worry about it. Sony, on the other hand, was asked recently by investors. We talked about this a few days ago, and Sony was asked about Switch 2, and they gave a response that seemed very, I don't know, not great. We're going to go over that response again because actually we have another thing going on today. You guys might remember, if you don't, Shuhei Yoshida. We're going to go over who he was at Sony. He worked there for a long time, was actually head of Sony Interactive Entertainment, their PlayStation stuff for 11 years, and then got shifted or I guess demoted to a different role before he ended up retiring this year. And he went on the Kit and Krista podcast to actually talk about what exactly, not him personally, but how exactly Sony views Nintendo. And my Lord, it all kind of lines up with what Sony said about Nintendo Switch 2 when investors asked them about it, because investors obviously are like, hey, Switch 2's blowing up. Do you guys care? Are we going to do anything about this? So let's first go over those quotes from a few days ago, and then we'll show you how this kind of lines up with what Yoshida is saying the internal attitude is about Nintendo. Because I got to be honest, I think Sony is completely misguided. And this goes into a live stream I did last night where I put in the headline, like, the industry needs to change the way it views Nintendo, because the way they're viewing Nintendo is so fundamentally incorrect. But it really starts at the top with a company like Sony, who has been an industry leader for a long time. Again, they're one of the two titans in the console space. So let's go ahead and get to the original comments from a few days ago when investors said, because this comes directly from people who currently work at PlayStation and Sony. So they talk about how they can combat the threat of Switch 2. So we go down here. This is from investors. So some investors are concerned that the improved specs of Switch 2 and Nintendo's improved relationships with third-party publishers will lead to tougher competition for PlayStation in the next few years. What do you think of those concerns? Hideki Nishino says, we closely monitor the overall gaming industry, including the action of other market participants. Additionally, a catalyst in the market is great for the industry as a whole. As they invigorate excitement, they demand more products. So it's great to have people launching new things. As I mentioned previously, we have a different strategy. PlayStation 5 is designed for immersive gameplay experiences, and this includes the innovative DualSense controller features as well, which I do really like the DualSense controller, just a personal note. We believe PlayStation 5 level performance is required to achieve a great experience on big screens, and in this way, we have provided a unique offering for players and creators in this current console generation. Publisher strategies are increasingly shifting towards being multi-platform, so more platforms can run the same game, which is great from a creator's perspective. Among those platforms, our mission is that we will continue to be the best place to play and publish. As such, we have empowered our creators to leverage our offerings and services to create amazing, unique experiences for players with high engagement and great monetization opportunities. Consumers love hearing about that. We have done this consistently as the industry and competitive dynamics have evolved. PlayStation Studio and our franchises have a special role in showcasing the PlayStation experience and then strengthening the player's relationship It says some are also concerned about Nintendo's appeal to the younger generation could lead to market share declines for PlayStation. If those younger users choose not to graduate, oh my gosh, I hate that term, to PlayStation as they age, what is Sony Interactive doing to increase its addressable market among younger users and overall mix of users? Hideki Nishino. The PlayStation brand and offering has resonated with a wide range of players over 3 decades now. The number of users engaged in our platform continue to grow. By supporting such a large number of creators, we are able to provide the largest range of content available, catering to all demographics, geographics, and playstyles. We believe that by constantly investing in players' relationships with the brand and our relationship with creators, we will ensure we stay close to all players' hearts throughout their lifetime. On the first-party content side, this comes from Herman Hulst, we're also reaching to a greater range of audiences more directly, including younger players with our first-party lineup, in addition to our franchises with more multi-generational fan bases, such as Marvel's Spider-Man. We also have franchises that appeal to a range of different player segments. Horizon's a good example, very popular with female players. Astrobot has been a hit with children and adults alike. We continue to drive engagement to PlayStation's ecosystem and brand by bringing franchises to new formats, film, television, anime. Anime in particular is appealing to a key younger audience. I actually don't have too big of an issue with this second response here, because since the question was so pointed at younger audiences. But up here, it's kind of interesting when they talk about, like, PlayStation 5 is designed for an immersive experience, which is just trying to say nobody else is designed that way. And then we believe PS5 level performance is required to achieve a great experience on big screen. Basically, like, things are only going to be good on your TV if you play it with PlayStation. Now, this attitude did upset some gamers on other platforms, be it Xbox, PC, or Nintendo, but maybe we shouldn't be shocked because Shuhei Yoshida went on the Kit and Krista podcast to talk about Sony's overall viewpoint of Nintendo. And let's just say, I don't think it's going to make Nintendo fans very happy, the way that Sony views things internally. And he's noting he can say this because he doesn't work there anymore, and there's no one in PR stopping him. Now, before we do that, some Nintendo fans might not know who Shuhei Yoshida is. So we're over on the Wikipedia article here, where it says, he was president of SIE, which is Sony Interactive Entertainment, Worldwide Studios. So that's like, the person in charge of all the PlayStation stuff for Sony Interactive Entertainment from 2008 to 2019. So 11 years he spent as like the head of like their software development stuff. And then you ended up moving over as the head of PlayStation Indies in 2019 until his retirement from the company this year, 2025. He's been a key member of the PlayStation brand since its original concept, having been part of the company since 1993. So he's been with the PlayStation brand this entire time, essentially. So obviously he knows the inner workings of Sony quite well. And while he's retired, he's been enjoying going around on various podcasts. And on the Kit and Krista podcast, he revealed something that I think I've always known about Sony, but is something that, it's like saying the quiet part out loud. And it's very unfortunate because they really don't seem to understand the appeal of Nintendo. And they even only take them as a threat in a single market. What are we talking about? Well, Shuhei Yoshida says PlayStation only really views Nintendo's competition in Japan. That's the headline, but there's so much more in here. So let's go down here. The giant quotes are right here. This is all from the Kit and Krista podcast, which we'll link down below. It says, working for PlayStation, their perception of the competition is always Xbox. They see Microsoft being the competition because Xbox is very similar with performance and hardware, like a high-end console, mature games. And Nintendo is very, very different. Nintendo is family-friendly, games for everyone, not about technology. It's more than having fun with friends and family and always having multiple controllers, which is kind of funny because Nintendo didn't always include multiple controllers in the box, but that's neither here nor there. Bundled with the hardware. Inside Sony, even when they do a business analysis, so they're just analyzing the gaming industry business, Nintendo doesn't show up. So there's a competition market share between PlayStation and Xbox. And somehow they don't include Nintendo, which, again, Shuhei Yoshida goes on to like talk in this that like these viewpoints inside Sony are not his own. But that this is just a company-wide thing. Like, they just don't take Nintendo seriously. All right. Not that they're ignoring Nintendo, but they do not necessarily feel Nintendo is competition because Nintendo is covering a different audience. in a bigger scale, Nintendo is bringing in a young audience into gaming, and some of them, when they grow up, might graduate into more mature systems like PlayStation or Xbox. Of course, there's a huge respect for what Nintendo does in terms of how Nintendo should be doing in the industry. We all felt that it's great to have Nintendo continue to be successful so that they can grow the industry and continue to grow the industry together kind of feeling. Except for one market. It's Japan. In Japan, Nintendo is hugely strong and Xbox almost doesn't exist. It's all about Nintendo versus Sony. So PlayStation people working in Japan clearly see Nintendo as competition, but outside Japan, PlayStation people clearly see Xbox as primary competition. And this really, really matters because Sony Interactive Entertainment's main headquarters has shifted over to the United States. They're no longer located in Japan. So it really, really matters that they don't think Nintendo is competition. And what really irks me, and I think this is probably what irked you guys when I read that, is this idea that not that they don't think Nintendo's competition. Obviously, they compete in the market in completely different ways, but it's that they feel Nintendo as a company is the one to bring in the younger gamers who then grow up and mature into PlayStation gamers. So they view Nintendo as a company that grows them. Unless it's Japan. And then in Japan, the attitude totally shifts. Why? Because Nintendo's kind of the only console that matters in Japan. I don't know if you guys paid attention the last decade. Switch went from going from 3DS to Switch. Nintendo's the only thing that kind of matters there. So yeah, they recognize in Japan Nintendo's the competitor. But why? Because of the sales, right? They dominate in sales so much in Japan, they consider it a competitor there, but nowhere else. Everywhere else, they're not a competitor. They think they could just grab young fans and convert them into PlayStation gamers. And look, I think that's a strategy for sure. And Sony has been really successful at the things they do and been consistently successful. But I don't know if it's because they're converting Nintendo fans. All you gotta do is look at this chart. This chart's been provided by Nintendo several times over the Switch generation, showing that Nintendo is holding on to their fans. Maybe they get them when they're young. I don't know. Obviously I grew up with Nintendo, so they got me when I was young, but I still play on PlayStation. I still play on Xbox. I still play on PC. I didn't stop playing Nintendo just because there's other options. I go where the games are that I want to play, right? Or where my friends are playing, like Madden. A lot of my friends that play Madden play it on Xbox, so I have an Xbox for that. PlayStation has some really cool exclusives and sometimes some really great third parties that arrive there before they go on PC. I like PC gaming for mouse and keyboard controls and strategy games. So there's lots of reasons that I play all these different systems, but the bottom line is Nintendo isn't losing their fans as they get older. They're maintaining that fan base through adulthood. I mean, go back and look at this chart. The primary age group of players playing Nintendo Switch, this is according to Nintendo. You can refute this data. We can talk about how kids make up ages and parents buy things and set up accounts and then let their kids play on it. Whatever excuse you want to make. 25 to 45 is the biggest range of gamers. That's people that, let's say they did start as kids. So they started as kids maybe 15 years ago for the 25-year-olds, and let's say 30 years ago, 35 years ago for the 45-year-olds. And they didn't go anywhere. They're still here playing Nintendo. So maybe you're just wrong, Sony. This is what I mean by the whole industry needs to shift how they view Nintendo. I mean, some of the words out there is it's not a mature platform for mature gamers. You're acting like there's not M-rated games on Nintendo. It's a weird, Nintendo hasn't even published M-rated games. What about Bayonetta 3 and Bayonetta 2? Those were M-rated games published by Nintendo. They funded and published those games. Sega might own the IP, but Nintendo funded and published those games. Those are effectively under Nintendo's control, those two specific games in the franchise. It's very interesting to me that, yes, Nintendo is generally trying to make games that can be enjoyed by all ages. Like Breath of the Wild can be enjoyed by an 8-year-old as much as it can be enjoyed by a 50-year-old. But that's just because Nintendo makes their games inclusive of such a wide range of audience. It didn't become less appealing because people got older. That's what they're missing in this. Yes, it can be appealing to kids, but it's also massively appealing to adults. It didn't become less appealing. In fact, adults sometimes actually are more appealed to with this stuff because they recognize more and more things and more nuances in the game that you maybe didn't recognize when you were a kid. Like if you are someone who played Breath of the Wild 8 years ago and you were, say, I don't know, let's say 10 years old, and now you're an adult and you got yourself a Switch 2. Cool. And you haven't played Breath of the Wild in 8 years, maybe revisit the game and you might find more and more things you enjoy about it today than you did back then because you were just a child and a lot of these things maybe got overlooked when you were playing it. That's what's so cool about Nintendo is they find a great way, whether it's Mario or Kirby or Star Fox or Xenoblade, to find a way to appeal to a wide range of people where the reason it stays appealing when you get older is there's actually a lot of depth and a lot that goes into it and a lot of nuance into these games that just aren't appreciated as much when you're a kid. So the games actually just kind of feel like they get better as you get older. And Nintendo has this unique way of making games that does that. Now, some games are clearly targeted for more story-rich and teenagers and above people. I would argue like Xenoblade Chronicles is a sort of game that's really, really meant for people that love deep, enriching stories. And that usually begins in like your teenage years all the way through, obviously, adulthood. So I feel like those games are ones that Nintendo has that sort of appeal like that. I think Zelda has a much greater appeal with older audiences today than it does with younger audiences. Although younger audiences kind of want to get into Zelda because the older audiences are saying it's so cool and kids like playing things that adults think are cool. So when adults say Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild are really, really cool and look at this Game of the Year stuff, yeah, kids tend to want to check that out. That's kind of how that works, right? And this isn't to insult PlayStation and their offerings, and they obviously make a lot more M-rated games, and they make a lot of games that are meant to be played by adults just by nature of them being very story-rich experiences, right? Like Sony's really well known for, they make extremely cinematic, story-rich games, and that is meant to appeal to older audiences. Sometimes they're overly violent at times, and that's fine too. There's nothing actually wrong with that, and that is true that their games are all literally meant for adults, besides things like Sackboy, Sackboy's Big Adventure, obviously Astrobot. They do have some games that dabble in that E for everyone, but I think I sort of understood that this mentality existed when Astrobot won Game of the Year last year. And to their credit, they gave lots of credit to Mario and Nintendo for inspiring them. But they mentioned that their game was made for children. And it's interesting because the majority of people playing Mario are adults. So it's fine to like want to make it a game that appeals to kids, but that's one thing that's so great about Nintendo. And if you pay attention to the way they market their games, yeah, they'll have some commercials here and there that have kids. They also have adults playing it. Young adults, old adults, grandmas, parents. They have adults in their commercials and marketing playing Mario. They don't just talk about how it's for kids. And that was the thing that kind of caught me a little off guard when they said we made Astrobot for kids. It's like, but a lot of the people singing the praises of Astrobot are actually adults, not kids. By the way, my kids played Astrobot. They beat it. They think it's awesome, but they're not on the internet gushing about it. The people that are adults, like a lot of adults played Astrobot. That's just a fact. So I think that Sony just has this weird outlook on the whole industry, and it's an old school outlook that matches this entire attitude that Nintendo is for kids. I mean, they try to go, well, also families. No, also just single adults in college. Also, there's like gamers that have been gaming for 40 years. They don't really leave Nintendo. They keep playing it. They might play other stuff, but they still play Nintendo games. I mean, look at all the Nintendo YouTubers out there. There are some that are quite young, but look at all like the big ones. You know, the big ones that love and enjoy Nintendo. Bob Wolf's a pretty big YouTuber. Yes, he covers other things, but he's really into Nintendo. Look at Beat 'em Ups, right? He's a dad, and him and his wife are really into Nintendo, and they're one of the biggest ones out there. Scott the Woz, really into Nintendo. He's an adult. Spawn Wave, he covers everything, but he also really enjoys Nintendo. RGT85, Nintendo Prime. Just look around in the content creator space, and you'll see that there's a lot of adults that just love playing Nintendo, and it's not because we never grew up. It's because their games are appealing literally to all ages for the most part, and sometimes even more appealing to you when you get older, because there is a lot of depth and there is a lot going into the games. Now, Nintendo is a little weak on the story at times. Like Mario games not gonna write home about the amazing story of most Mario games. I mean, some of their RPGs maybe, but you're not gonna write home about a lot of their stories. But they also just provide a lot of nuance in the mechanics and the fun and the gameplay that's really appreciated the older you get. So to me, I just think that this just represents something that sucks. It's a reality check that obviously we sort of knew. A huge chunk of the industry viewed Nintendo in this way. We found this out with Switch when all the interviews came out back in 2017 from these third-party companies that were laughing at the idea of putting their game on Switch. Why would we support a kid console? And look, I've experienced this in real life where I've had other adults come up to me because I'm not necessarily wearing this stuff, but when I'm out like wearing a Mario shirt or something and I'm out shopping with my kids. I actually made a whole video on this, how a person approached me in a Costco and got in my face about wearing Nintendo stuff while I'm grocery shopping with my kids, and just unprompted, out of nowhere, I was just in the section to get some eggs and milk, and like just came at me in front of my kids about how childish I am to be playing Mario at my age, and that, shame on you, and how bad of a parent and example I'm setting. And I'm just like, what the fuck? The only bad example being set right now is you, sir. I really hope my kids don't grow up to act like you right now. Holy shit. So unfortunately, this is an attitude that seems to permeate beyond just the companies. But I think it's time. I think it's time for the industry to change and shift how it views Nintendo. Yes, obviously, they try to appeal to families. They try to appeal to kids. They try to appeal to everyone. And I think when you focus on they just tried to appeal to kids and families, you're missing out on the actual larger fan base of Nintendo that is significantly beyond just being a family and being a child. Like, yeah, I have kids. Guess what? Before I had them as an adult, I was still playing and loving Nintendo games. So I think that it's just being very close-minded to what makes Nintendo appeal to such a broad audience. And also, I think stifles competition a little bit. Now, look, PlayStation and Nintendo are the two titans, and they're both doing extremely well right now, right? PlayStation 5 just came off its best year. Obviously, Switch 2 just broke all these records launching. Both companies are doing healthy, but it's arguable the companies aren't pushing each other, because you have investors asking Sony, hey, Switch 2, like it's blowing up. What are we going to do about this? And Sony going, we don't care. Games are best played on PlayStation. And besides, Nintendo just brings kids in and then they mature and buy PlayStation when they get older. It's like, it's really close-minded. It's just interesting to me. Because you'll never catch Nintendo. Nintendo does anti-consumer things. We're not like giving passes on that. But Nintendo, you're not going to catch them like talking about the consumers of PlayStation and being like shit-talking those consumers and being like, well, those consumers are all just adults that love super violent video games or something like that. Like, Nintendo would never say that. It's nice that, maybe the two companies don't view each other as like direct competition, but then they are direct competition. They very much are direct competition. People don't necessarily graduate from Nintendo to PlayStation. That was the case. There wouldn't be 150 million Switch sales and only 75 million, 80 million PlayStation 5 sales. Like, clearly people were not graduating at the rate that Sony thinks they do. And obviously Sony knows their own age metrics for their users. They don't share them the way Nintendo has. I'm assuming they're probably mostly adults, especially because their systems are expensive. But guess what? This system right here is also expensive. It's $450. Nintendo wasn't pricing this for kids. I'm not saying there's no kids that own a Switch 2. There are certainly parents and families that, are decently well off that could buy their kids a Switch 2 and all that. Or kids that saved up their allowances and stuff for years in order to buy one. Absolutely, those exist. But the point is, like, this system doesn't feel like a kid console. It literally isn't priced like a kid console. The games aren't priced like it's for kids. Nothing about it is really priced or looking that way in general, right? It's very much for the adults that enjoy playing Nintendo, at least right now. That might change when the light version comes out and we get deeper into the console's life cycle, and then more of the smaller games like Drag X Drive. I know people keep yelling at me, it's not Drag X Drive, it's Drag and Drive. Nintendo said it multiple times, it's Drag and Drive. Yeah, I know what they said, but this is the logo, guys. I'm just reading the damn logo. They want to call it Drag and Drive. They should have put an and sign. Why is there an X? Is it Drag Cross Drive? I don't know. But it's an X. It's a cross. It's not what I'm mad at me, man. Nintendo's wilding out. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am the Vader Rebel Rats. Man, I know it was all mumbled. I am Nathaniel Rumpfeljans from Nintendo Prime. Thank you for tuning in. I might have another video later today on some news. We will not be live streaming. I know last night I said we would be live streaming tonight. We will actually not be live streaming tonight. My son's baseball game got moved to 8 p.m., so I'm not even going to be back here till like 10, 11 o'clock at night because of the baseball game. So, yeah, there won't be any stream tonight, but we will be back tomorrow for Donkey Kong Bonanza in the AM, baby. We'll be live streaming at 7 a.m. for DK Bonanza. We go an hour ahead of time. And then we obviously have our podcast tomorrow as well, which is really exciting. We got a jam-packed show tomorrow with like 4 guests, and it's going to be wild. Thank you for tuning in. And as always, folks, I'll catch you in the next video.